And hello again. This is a bit messy. Let me clear this up and dive right in. What I'm doing here is exploring a particular map, which is something that was created in another instance with an erosion map, right? So, I mean, to give you an idea, I just started with, I don't remember where I started from. Maybe it was just a plasma noise, something like this. And then let me turn this brush off. There you go. Then I created the erosion map right here under stylize. And there you go, erosion. And there you go. So that created an interesting looking map. And so here is another one that I thought, we could do something with that for funny, interesting looking brush images, right? So here are some rather wacky creatures. Sometimes you see two dots that look like eyes, and might be perfect timing for Halloween to create some creatures with that. Or perhaps some magnetic fields for some sunspots that you'll carve out of the sun. Lots of different ways to use these brushes. Maybe some really fancy shapes for snowflakes out of this world from a different planet, not symmetrical snowflakes. So let's see, how can we work with that? Well, for one, when we have the image here, one thing we'll want to do is also have a selection mask of it, right? The image we loaded may have only the RGB channel, but we also need a selection mask like an alpha channel. And we can easily produce that simply as a copy of this. And that's what I have here. It's a copy in the alpha channel. I'm going to close this and simply start. Let's see, let's go close these. Let's close these. We'll create the same thing again. So here is a copy of the erosion map. And the first thing I'll do is I'll say, well, let's pretend we have a selection and we'll go and store it. And we actually didn't have a selection yet, but we have everything here stored. And what I'm going to do is get the image into this stored copy, right? Get image, grabs the image and loads it into this as a grayscale selection copy or stored copy of the selection. And then I can replace it back in here, right? Now let me show you that again. If I clear the selection under the selection, deselect, and then erase here to white. All right. Now if I replace the selection, you'll see what it does. I don't have the marching ants enabled because there are so many. I disabled it here, but you can see I have the overlay. If I don't show the overlay, then you don't see what's selected. But you can have the marching ants on, and that's really going to slow it down, or be very difficult to see. That's another issue when there are so many and they're very soft. So it's probably better not to have the selection mask, the marching ants on. I'll disable it here because that lets you be much faster. It's very time consuming to refresh all these marching ants here and keep animating them. So what I'd like to do now is simply work from this to indicate, to just select a portion and make that into a brush image, right? So it could be all white or it could be black. It doesn't actually really matter so much because the selection is what's going to dictate what's going to be used in the brush. The white parts, okay, they may be white, there may be some other color. The fact that they are selected is what makes them visible, right? So the selection mask has sort of an overriding control. And what we need to do is, if we want to isolate a portion of this, that's all we need to do is perhaps select something like the ellipse or some other shape. But the problem is that that will compete with the selection we already have here, right? This selection shape is very sophisticated, and that's the one I want to keep. So one thing I could do is pick it up with the custom brush tool, right? This one here, custom brush selector tool. So I could go something like this and select that area, and that's now, if I show it in my custom brush, there it is. That's not great because it goes to the edge and then suddenly stops. So I want rather a fading. And so there's a tool here in the area with the gradients and lens flares and special effects. When you right click that, you have a couple of selection tools or gradient tools. One of them is a selection fader, right? And what that does is it lets you fade the selection. Now what we mean with that is that you have the white area here that's selected, and the pink area is not selected. Well, at some point here towards the end of these long tentacles, you'd like to basically cut the selection off, right? Where? All the way here on the right edge, beyond it. So what you do is you simply use that tool, the selection fader, and say fade it from here to here, meaning fully selected here and then deselected here. But it's a multiply operation, so whatever was already selected remains. Whatever was not selected remains. However, beyond that here, it will cut the selection off. It will go away. So we can do the same thing here above it. Go something like this. And that will cut off the selection in the outer area here. Something like this. And I'll do that in the lower left quadrant, going to the lower left. There you go. This one here I don't want to see, so maybe I'll select that. I fade the selection on that as well. So again, it's called the selection fader because it fades away, and it's not replacing the existing selection. It's combining with it in a multiply way. Right. So you can let's take a look at that. Just let me undo 1 or 2 times here. For instance, this area here, if I don't want this area to be showing, I simply need to be starting the selection from here and ending it here. That will give me a fading where this part is basically off now. And same thing here, if I want this part here to be selected but this part not to be, I simply go around here and then that will cut this off. It will fade a gradual transition to be completely off here at some point. So I can also do that here. I can do that here. If I don't want these parts, I can fade it around like that. All right, so that's how you can select a portion of the existing selection, right? And we know that everything on the outside now is not selected. That means we can easily pick this up as a custom brush right here from the brush menu. Use selected as brush. All right, pick it up, and now if you store it under the brush menu here, store and manage, you now have a copy of that shape that we were looking at, and the transparency is in the brush as well. So if we, for instance, erase the background, we can see it better here now. We can paint with that. Right? Now that can be painted in a couple of ways. It can be in default mode, it can be in additive mode, and when you do that, you could, for instance, reduce the opacity to a very low value, something like this, so you barely see it, but as you keep going over it, it keeps accumulating and adding. That's why, because we are in the additive mode. Right, now you could be also in the subtractive mode, so you actually remove. It gets darker and darker, and you carve a hole in there, and that's where you could do something like a sunspot. Right, if you have a very bright surface and then you just keep doing something like this here, you get some sort of a sunspot carving out there. There's a lot of other things you can carve that way or shape that way. One thing that I'll do is I'll go back to the original image. First I'll replace the selection mask. I can't see it here because it's all black. So even with the pink on that selection, the overlay pink, it's not going to show. I'm going to need to erase the background to white to better see that. Something like this. Or I could also load the image itself, so you get not just the you don't get just the alpha channel to control what's selected or not. You also see the darkening due to this image being restored here. Be that as it may, one thing we want to do is select another one, perhaps this little dude down here. It looks almost like a little skull head. So what we'll do, let's first turn off my brush preview, and I'll do the selection again, the selection fader. Right click on the gradient tool, find the selection fader tool, and so here I'm going to go, let's do the upper area here. See these long hair, I'm going to keep them, but around here I want that gone. All right, so what I'm going to do is fade away just around here. Very short area. Everything here up the top, you see it here still, but it's pink, and that means it's not selected. See right here we have them in white, and here they're in pink. So I'm going to do another one on the left side here, just around here. I'm going to go from around, let's zoom in as much as we can. I'm going to go from around here to here. So from here, turn to the left, and that fades it away. Now it still shows it just like it did up here, but it's turned pink, indicating that it's not selected. Even though the RGB values didn't get changed, the selection value did, and it got deselected. I can do that here, a little dab, and gradually do that all around it until I have an isolated area. There's still some stuff here I don't want. Let's go do one up here. There you go. Now we have a nicely isolated selection, and we can be assured that everything around it is not selected because the selection fader made it so, right? It deselected. If it had selections before, it deselected that. And so what I'll do now is simply, again, use this as a brush, and I can preview the brush, and there it is, and I can store it. There it is, store and manage this brush. And so now I have already two, and the idea is to really create a few of these. Maybe a big one, maybe a couple of small ones. This one, I don't think I have this one. Is that the one I already have? Maybe I did. I don't remember. Yeah, I think that's the one I have. So let's grab another one. There's a big one. Look at this one. In fact, maybe I'd like to insert something here in the middle, make it a little bit white there too. So I'm going to paint this on top and actually do a combination where we have a big selection, but also a really strong, solid heart. So let's do this. Let's go replace the selection mask, and we may need to add the selection. So let's add to the selection simply by painting on it, right? We can paint on the selection, and whatever we do here will actually add to the selection when we snap out of the selection mode. Right now is paint on alpha mode is active. If we kill it, it's back to painting in the RGB only. And we do now have something, once again, that we could do a fader. Let's do there, selection fader tool, fade it from here to here, here to here, just gradually fade everything away on the outside of this starry shape. And there you go. And so now we have an interesting shape that we can pick again as a custom brush. And so now this one is very fluffy. If we give it full opacity, you'll see what it does here. And it did have a black transparency, black background. So there's a little bit of blackness to it. See on the edge, it's not just going away with white to nothing. It's actually showing a bit black. So we may need to pre-multiply the selection here. The pre-multiply correction to white. No, black actually. The black is what needs to go away. Yeah, so now we have a cleaner transition to the transparent edges. And so that's the interesting idea here, to just create some brushes that you can store. Where is it? Store, and there you go. So we have, oh, that's the whole thing now. That's not good. That's not what I wanted. Anyway, we have a couple of, we do have a couple of images like this one, that's a brush, and we have this one. And the last thing I wanted to do also is to show you how you can use some of these brushes as to create some really funky I don't know, caterpillars or some creatures from outer space under the oceans or something like that. So obviously we'll want to usually have a selection mask of the new thing that we create, and when we can create something like this, and here's our caterpillar. But what we'd like to do perhaps is have it automatically select. Now we can do that once again simply by doing the get image and then replace, and now we have the selection. And so we could pick that up as a custom brush, just like we've been doing now, and do the pre-multiply correction if that's necessary here, pre-multiply correction, and make it a really nice set of caterpillars. Or another way you could do this is to paint it. Let's do this one here. Paint it in a mode which you can see under the brush settings. That's new with version 11. Not the brush settings, but this particular mode. If you go to the FX tab, right, normally you're here, you have most of the controls for the brush. But what you can do is beyond the custom brush options, you'll have the FX and the special effects. You enable that, and then you go to the mode, And under the modes, the newest one is called RGB and alpha. Right, so you paint not just the RGB values, the red, green, blue, but also the alpha with each brush stroke. Right, so go do this, erase, and then start drawing, and you see that it also turned that purple and automatically added the mask and the selection. Right, so it becomes an alpha channel along the red, green, blue. So you have an interesting shape with its selection mask in place as well. Right, so for instance, just one brush stroke, if you go and clear the selection and actually select initiate, you need to initialize it here by going to this option. Now you can do one brush stroke, boom, it's selected. And you can go and pick this up as a custom brush, store and manage a copy. Excuse me, use the selected as brush, there you go. And then perhaps once again do the pre-multiply correction if you think it shows a little bit of that blackness on the edges, and then you can go to brush and store and manage a copy. So now you have this caterpillar in the brush. All right, okay, well, I hope this didn't confuse too much, and to the contrary, helped a little bit. If you want to create some new types of brushes, you know, one funky way to get there or to get started is with something like this erosion map, and from there you can let your imagination run wild. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.